Landen Hatchett and Zach Durfee are back in action.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like you want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, we got a really fun show for all the everydayers today. We're going to get in some updates from the recruiting trail. The Huskies suffered a big loss in the 2026 class. We'll get to that. Any other 2025 updates we might have. We're going to talk about which freshmen we think might see the field the most this season outside of Damon Williams. But before then, when we talked to Jedd Fisch after Saturday night's scrimmage, one thing he told us is that he expects Zach Durfee and Landen Hatchett, who both played and participated in the scrimmage, to be fully back in action by the middle of this week.
Yeah, and I think that is the ultimate significant gainer here, because when we've seen Landen start to slowly make his way back, and as I reported from Big Ten Media Day when Jedd said that, hey, like he's ready to go at the start of fall camp, it's like, okay, but at what percent? And that was kind of my whole sticking point. Is it's great to have Landen back, and even this early, and it's still great. So it doesn't pour water in that regard in any stretch. But there is a difference between, hey, Landen and guard are at the same exact position in terms of where they're at in their rehab process.
So sorry. So let's give a little bit more of the backstory there, because that's how it started. We didn't see Landen doing any team stuff through the first couple of days of fall camp. And then we talked to Brennan Carroll, the offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, and we asked him the same question, same day we talked to Landen. And he said, yeah, he is doing contact stuff. He's doing everything except teamwork because we don't want him to get hurt. And we didn't necessarily see a ton of that. We didn't see him doing any of that work, where he told us that he was working with Durfee doing one-on-ones. We didn't see any of that. And then, of course, the next day, they started doing a whole lot more of that, just kind of in the public eye, which was a really good sign, because I think that was the first day they went with full pads too. So I'm sure that kind of played into that decision a little bit. But yeah, no, I'm sorry, continue. I just want to make sure that full backstory was available.
No, for sure. And I think, because I'm glad you said that, because I'm sure we probably want to circle back to it in the end. But I think that's why, there is a little bit of a gap between where Landen and guard were in their respective rehabs coming back. Again, because the injuries were, one was in fall camp and one was before the Sugar Bowl. There's a significant season in between there of time. So the fact that Landen's already back is still great. But given that we didn't see him that involved early on, and to, the coaching staff's point, I don't think they much like both Jedd and Jimmy Doherty, the quarterback coach, acknowledge this, where there's still excuses no matter what we say. But the relationship between D'Angelo and Landen, and that switch going from first team to second team, and then throwing Parker Cross in there, and it's no slight to Parker Cross, but it's just once you start, if you imagine a game in any point, whether it's against Weber State or Penn State, and you're rotating three centers throughout the game.
Right.
That just in your head, you're not going to be able to get into a flow, no matter how good those guys are. And they're both very good centers in their own right. So it's not, we didn't see any really too many low snaps or bad snaps or high snaps. Again, so, some high, some low, some medium range, but nothing egregious in the sense of, ooh, wow, we got some concerns here. But there's that relationship piece that I think still, when they get back this week, you're still probably talking, even in the mock game coming up on Saturday, I would still say it's 50% in terms of that relationship and cohesion between both of them.
I would somewhat disagree with that, but are you talking between Landen Hatchett and Will Rogers, correct?
Yes.
So I disagree with that. And one reason that I say that is because we also talked to Will Rogers after practice on Saturday. And one of the things he said was that they've been working together for a while. And that's something we saw from Landen in the spring. And yes, all this changes in a game, of course. But when you're the good news is they were snapping together throughout the spring. We saw Landen doing that for Will in some of the 7-on-7 drills that they were having, where he was just, no pads on, just taking snaps. And Will said that they were doing that throughout the spring, throughout the summer, and they've been doing that this fall as well. So we know that was always kind of what the plan was, despite what you or I might think about, being careful, managing the injury carefully, where if they feel confident, the doctors feel confident, the rehab staff feels confident that he's good to go, great. That's a huge upgrade for this team. That's awesome. You love to see that. And I feel, because just to transition here a little bit, because we definitely need to talk about Durfee as well. I feel the same way about Zach Durfee, where when we talked to him at media day, we know our buddy Christian Capel did as well, that the whole plan was, it feels like he might be back on day one. We didn't necessarily see him there. It took a week and a half for him to get ramped up as well. But then once he did get back, it's just looked awesome. Where I have one play that I wrote down in my notebook the other day where he dropped into coverage on a play against Jonah Coleman and just went screaming down the field with him and made a really nice play to get a PBU, where having both these guys back is such a huge impact for this team as a whole.
Absolutely. If you think about it, it's almost in a way, it's like two bonus transfers that come back or that feel like they're being added to your program. It's like, hey, like when healthy, this guy, wow, we didn't have this before. It's like, well, you did, but you didn't. And I'm glad you mentioned that about Durfee, because he's just that game. When we talked about, the success that the defensive line had, and especially the edges when it came to that, sacks and tackles for loss in the first scrimmage, and then you add a consistent Zach Durfee, because Durfee was not out there more than, what do you want to say, 20%, 30%?
Something like that. And he did get a sack while he was out there too. I had him with a sack and a pressure.
Right. So, but that's what I'm saying. He was still out there making an impact, but in the grand scheme of things from what we're going to see in the fall. But imagine, as I was saying that, it's also then think about, okay, that means Isaiah Ward's now rotating it behind him, and there's different things you can do. And the different looks that we talk about the defense giving the offense throughout, much of Saturday's scrimmage, just adds another layer to it. And so it's a matter of, you're just getting all these guys right back at the perfect time, and you still have 2 or 3 weeks to ramp up, because you know what Durfee's going to be able to do. He's a senior who's got that experience. He's not a guy where, hey, this freshman 5-star edge rusher might, be coming along. It's no, we just need him fully healthy. And you go ahead.
No, yeah. So I have a couple things to say there, because everything you said is certainly on the money. Where one thing I want to talk about was when I mentioned the sack and the pressure in the spring game, I feel that adds to your point, because he's only playing 20-30% of the snaps and he's still finding a way to make an impact. That part is great. And it also adds to a discussion you and I have had throughout the summer, where it's, what's this edge room going to look like? What is this going to do? Who's going to play? What's the snap count going to look like? Who's going to do the most? And adding Zach to this mix, a fully healthy Zach to this mix, muddies the waters in that sense. But in the same sense, this is going to sound really weird. At the same time, it also cleans them up, because that Zach is probably going to end up as a starter. That he's going to be that guy that you can rely on. And at the same point, now it's all right. We know that, for example, Jaden Wynn and Sean Lynch, as you said, where they get a lot of pressure, Jedd Fisch praised their chemistry and them working together and everything like that. Now, all right, these are two guys that we believe can work together, and that this is going to be an edge pairing. Where the nice thing about all these guys is, they, all have similar skill sets, so they can do a whole lot of things, but they also complement each other really well. You could probably say the same thing about, do you want to throw Zach Durfee and Isaiah Ward together? Or do you want to throw, Deshaun Lynch on the other side there, and then have Isaiah Ward and Jaden Wayne be a pairing, and Lance Holtzclaw and Maurice Himes, Lance Holtzclaw and Jacob Lane? Whatever it's going to look like, all of a sudden there are so many different ways that you can do it, and rotate guys in and keep them fresh, and do all these different things that you're really hoping for that, really are effective in the Big Ten, like a deep, talented, always fresh body of work, or just body of edge rushers. Like that is such an important thing that cannot be overlooked. And Steve Belichick has done such a good job of scheming it, and does such a good job of making sure that these guys are going to be effective no matter what. And just adding a talented Durfee, who we've been watching him for a year. We've been waiting for this for a year now. And now knowing that day is close and that he's going to get his opportunity soon is really, really exciting. And Lars, with that being said, which freshmen are going to see the field the most this season? Which we'll get to right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And I'm going back to the well again. I've got to talk about Bobby Witt here for a second, because he's getting nice MVP odds over on FanDuel. Aaron Judge does not deserve to be the favorite at this point. He is not a 5-tool guy the way Bobby Witt is. Bobby Witt makes so much more of an impact on the game, and he is propelling the Royals to, hey, they might catch Cleveland. They might take the division. And if they end up taking the division, Bobby Witt deserves to be the MVP. And you should go check out his odds over on FanDuel. Okay, Lars, we had a handful of players that we worked out before the show that we wanted to make sure that this segment was all about. And this is out, we're excluding Demond Williams from this because we know he's going to play. We've discussed whether he's going to burn his red shirt or not, but we each have to choose one guy from this group. It's Peyton Waters. It's Adam Mohammed. We've got Paki Finau in this mix. We're going to throw him in there. We got Audric Harris in this mix, and we've got Decker DeGraaf. And looking at this group, which guy of that handful of players do you, and Khmori House, sorry, we want to throw Khmori House in there as well. Of those 6 players, who do you think is going to see the most this season and why?
So I'm going to take, page out of your playbook and take the guy that's right from your backyard, Peyton Waters, because to me, he was the first guy that popped out on the field when you look at the scrimmage and what the setup, just to give some context for fans that obviously weren't able to be there. They basically did about 10 to 15 kicks, 5-10 kicks, kickoffs and things like kickoff rotations before the offense even took the field. So we're talking like Grady went out there, I think 3 or 4 different times right off the bat with a couple of different rotations. But one guy that was consistently in there at least twice was Peyton Waters. And I think to me, when you look at the depth at safety and everything that starts with special teams and, just the gut being a gunner, whether it's on punt coverage or special teams or what have you, he's just a guy that is come in and from day one back in the spring just has a high football IQ, played in multiple positions in the secondary at Birmingham. So he knows what to do and knows how to play football and really is basically given the coaching staff. I remember saying it over the summer. He's going to give the coaching staff a reason to not play him. You're going to have to find a reason to not play him. And he's given you none so far. And now how much action does he see at safety? Like I'm again, injuries will probably dictate that more so than anything. And, maybe Tristan Dunn, how he's able to develop and things like that ahead of the obvious startups of Mikkel, Cam, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Peyton is a guy where we've seen him make play after play in the secondary. And when he was on Gunners, he, seemed fine in that respect. So to me, it was like, okay, you have a guy where it's up to the coaching staff. Do you want to go 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12?
Sure.
And granted, most of those would be, probably on special teams. But he's just a guy where availability is your best availability. And he so far has consistently been a guy.
No, so you're absolutely right. And I certainly see where you're going with that. So Peyton is somebody I really wanted to talk about here. So, you did steal him from me. And I would have had a lot of fun making that argument, but I'm taking him off the table. And he actually wasn't going to be my number one choice for a very similar reason to why Khmori House would be my number one choice. Where Khmori was excellent at the scrimmage. Just excellent. Really, really impressive. He was flying the ball and showed exactly why Robert Balla is so high on him. He was awesome to watch. But there are so many guys ahead of him where you're right. Special teams is very important. You can't underrate that. And I can certainly see that path to the field for him. But there are so many veteran guys in front of him, especially at linebacker where there are 4 seniors. So I kind of took him off the table. I wrestled with the same issues with a lot of these guys. When you think about Adam Mohammed, where there are a lot of guys there, but they really like him. They really like what he brings to the table. So he was there for me. Audric Harris, Decker DeGraaf, Paki Finau, all these guys, when you look at it, you're just kind of like, okay, there's an argument to be made for all these guys. And ultimately, I'm changing what my original pick was. Originally, I was going to say Adam Mohammed for all those same reasons. And Adam, I think, burns his red shirt this year. I do. From, his physicality and what he's been able to show so far. I certainly believe that, but I'm going with Audric Harris, where Audric Harris has really put himself in the mix with a very strong last couple of days, where I'm a little embarrassed we didn't talk about him earlier because he was really, really good on Thursday at practice and on Friday too, where he's really looked impressive, especially in the absence of Rasheed Williams. And this is a guy where you can throw him outside if you want to. You can throw him inside if you want to. And he's not necessarily, I don't think he's necessarily ready to play inside just yet, but his speed and his ability to stretch the field from wherever he is something that he showed really nice chemistry with Demond Williams. He showed just a really nice ability to, contort his body midair to make adjustments at the last second and pull in nice catches. And if he, this is something where he might be the 5th or 6th receiver, but that's okay. where, if you want to rotate through these guys, if you want to get them through there all the time, which Jedd Fisch has said, we don't have a problem getting freshmen on the field. We don't have a problem doing that if they're giving us a reason to play them. And for all the reasons that you said, where Peyton Waters is giving the staff a reason to play him, Audric Harris has done the exact same thing over the last couple of weeks. I've been very impressed with everything he's thrown out there. And, I would still put Rashid ahead of him when he's healthy. And I feel with, receiver 5 and 6, that there's going to be a real battle where it's Keith Reynolds is in there. It's Kevin Greene Jr. that's in there. And it's Audric Harris, where those 3 guys right now, I feel, are battling for the last 2 spots on the 2 deep. And if Audric wins one of those spots, I'm not going to be shocked.
So my reaction wasn't shocked because of anything you said. Everything you said was 100% accurate. I was just thinking as you were going through that list, I'm like, actually, to your point, because again, you're talking about wide receiver 6 or 5, 6, 7, and that closer to 6 or 7 than 5. I think if we're being genuine in terms of how the numbers would stack up in that regard, is why I expected you to pick Decker DeGraaf. Because when you look at the tight end room now, again, to your point, Adam Mohammed, same exact thing, where it's like, okay, if not for Jonah Coleman, if Cam Davis wasn't returning and Cam Davis had graduated after last season, 100%. I think Adam Mohammed would be that third running back right there, no question about it. But because of the depth, and then you still have Sam Adams and some other guys to work in, okay, I can kind of see why he might be that 3rd, 4th, 5th guy. Decker, I mean, to me, it's Kalecki, Whitmore, and then it's Decker. And I understand. Yeah. And now, to be fair, this doesn't mean, we're going to see three tight end sets. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, given that we've seen significant numbers of 2 tight end sets in different ways, where if Kalecki's flexed out and Quentin Moore is your 6th offensive lineman, inline blocker who can still split out, Decker can do both. Now, the only thing with Decker is, can he get his blocking up to par enough to then, get into those 6 tight end roles where, because otherwise, absolutely, we saw it. He can split out. Like DeMond will find him. Will Rogers will find him. I'm sure Shaker Kendall can find him. I'm good with that. But until he gets the blocking down, that's kind of the hallmark of a pow tight end. It's Drew Sample in a nutshell, where, hey, I'm a dependable receiving option, but hey, I need to be a blocker first. This is kind of my role. I'm the guy who hand in the dirt, doing all the little things, but those roles matter just as much. That's why I bring up Drew Sample, where I'm not thinking him and Decker are a 1A, 1B in that, kind of similar mold. But I think if Decker could become a good blocker in that regard, it could be, a second round. I mean, Drew Sample was a second round pick, still playing with the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's like, you could still be that guy. And so obviously that's a massive, kind of long term for Decker. But that's why I think he could play so much as a freshman, because we mentioned the injury history with Kalecki last season. He's been no question fully healthy, but then again, we've seen Quentin Moore work through some stuff in fall camp, shall we say, and I don't think it's anything severe or long term.
No,
but that's also why you have Decker right there to say, okay, you still have a veteran in Kalecki, so you don't lose. You're not going straight from Quentin Moore to Decker DeGraaf as a true freshman like you would have in the spring. That was why getting Kalecki was so important. It's what Jordan Pow told us last week. And so all that is great, but Decker's still coming in. And then when you think about the 25 class with 2 guys coming in, okay, you want to ideally get one of those 2 freshmen between him and Charlie Kroll, probably listed as a sophomore next season with true sophomore experience. And I just think that it's shaping up, barring injury, for that to be the case this season.
So I certainly agree with you. And I want to make sure we just talk about these other 2 guys as well, where you made a really good point there for Adam Mohammed, where, if Cam Davis doesn't, I could see him getting the second most carries on this team, which is a wild thing to say for, especially an underrated 3-star freshman. But he's really proven it at every level, where I still believe he could be running back 3 on this team, where if you want to get a nice rotation going where Jonah's still going to get a majority of the carries and then Cam's right behind him, I think that there's I don't want to say just a scenario. I think that could end up being the plan where Adam is the next guy. And if he's one of those guys where it's, he's getting, I don't want to say like 5 carries a game, or that's not something that's going to work out. But if he's getting, 10 snaps a game, that's not something where I think we're going to be surprised, where he's shown that he can block. He's shown that he can run the ball, and he's shown that he can be a pass catcher, where all those things are really exciting. And just, as we move into this Jedd Fisch era of offense where, he wants it to be a little bit more balanced. He wants to be able to establish the run, and having a guy like Mohammed, who, when he's all filled out, is, going to end up being 6'2", 220. Like that's, That's a dude that you want to make sure he is as acclimated as possible for the Big Ten moving forward, and that will start this year. Where I think that's worth burning a red shirt over. Where even if it's a very limited amount of reps, where all of a sudden, if Jonah's off to the NFL next year, and of course we know that this is Cam's last year of eligibility, and Adam Mohammed is just ready to take 25 carries a game, where that's a stretch, but if that's what the plan is, it certainly doesn't seem like it would be that much of a surprise. And with Paki, it's one of those things where he certainly looks more physically ready now. He looks real good on the offensive line. He's put a little bit of left guard, a little bit of right guard. And I've really liked what I've seen from him. He moves really well. He clearly has added a bunch of good weight. And he's listed at 297 on the roster. I've seen some different things saying he's at 305 pounds. Whatever he's at in that range is good weight. Is it necessarily enough for his future? Not necessarily, but you cross that bridge in a year. You cross that bridge in 18 months. So that's a really nice sign. And I think he's somebody who we're going to see of the offensive lineman is probably going to play the most games. I know I've made a case for Justin Hilkema, and I still want to give him a shot at left tackle, just kind of see how that plays out. But when we look at it, Paki, I still think should redshirt. But if we see him in 3, 4, and 5 with a potential bowl game appearances this season, that's not something that I think would be shocking, and just something that would be a really, really good sign for his future. And Lars, with that being said, we got some updates from the recruiting trail. We got to start with some bad news. Right after a message from our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. For all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Lars, we haven't had a recruiting segment in a minute now, so it's nice to get this back on the show, and we'll get into some Ladarian Clardy stuff and Andrew Marsh and Phillip Bell as well. But we got to start with 2026, where unfortunate news where Kodi Greene, who was the top prospect in the state of Washington for a while, transferred down to Mater Dei, where he'll be playing alongside Dash Bailey this year. So I still wouldn't count anything out late, where there's a long time till signing day there, but decided to commit to Oregon over USC, Michigan, and Washington as the other finalists. And you always want to make sure that the trenches are beefed up moving forward. And this one stings a little.
It does. And especially, I think, as you mentioned, his younger brother or older brother, I believe, actually.
Yeah, his older brother is a walk-on safety. Yes.
Right. Well, walk-on. I mean, again, I'm with you on it. I think he's a walk-on, but to be fair, they got one scholarship, so at this point, who knows at this point. But I do think I'm glad you mentioned that it's still early in the process. So this is by no means, if this is a 25 guy, it's a lot different scenario where, okay, we're kind of looking in the closing stretch, so this would have meant official visits to be done. He hasn't taken any official visits yet. Brennan Carroll is still year one of the job, not even year one of the job. Month 7, 8 on the job, 8 month 8 on the job. And so
yeah, we're getting there.
Well, I'm trying to remember what day it is. I know me and you both have that problem. But when you think about it and you look at the 25 class, I mean, they just added Zach Durfee, so they're still just rounding out. So I don't even think Brennan has fully turned the page to 26 just yet. And when you think about the offensive line, especially, I know we talked about it in the past couple of shows over the last few weeks, where trying to project out the 25 class right now with all these guys rotating in and so many different pieces. And by the way, a lot of young guys that still might not even play this season. Like we're talking Lars Jedd, Paki Finau, highly-touted. We can go down the list of guys on this line that are redshirt freshmen who haven't even played yet. And when trying to project out 2 years down the line, what do you want to do? And it's not to say they don't want Kodi Greene or anything like that, but there's just I'm saying this is kind of why they haven't prioritized the 26 class as much. And I'm assuming that played a little bit of a role in this, whereas Oregon, they're as much as Washington fans are going to hate me saying this, they're a machine. That relationship has probably been established for a while now. So I think there's a little bit of catching up to do in that regard, but I don't think the door is closed by any stretch of the imagination either.
I certainly agree with you there. One thing that, it feels that Oregon has taken a little bit of extra pride in trying to come up here to Seattle and take the best guys from the area, where it certainly seems like that has become an added emphasis, where, you look at the one guy that they've got right now from the state for the 25 class, and that's Demetri Manning, where it's, oh yeah, like that was a guy Washington was really pushing for. And that one was another one where it's tough to see it play out the way that it did, or that's just such a big projectable guy that you'd love to have in there. But Lars, let's get into the 2025 class a little bit, where Andrew Marsh has set his commitment date. Phillip Bell has set a commitment, or he said he's made up his mind. Ladarian Clardy has pushed back his decision. Where do you want to start there? Because we know we have to hit on all three.
Let's start front to back. Let's start with, because you mentioned Clardy was last. Let's save him because we talked about him a decent amount. The first one you mentioned was
Andrew Marsh.
I think that one is, I would, if you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, I would have said that they're probably in a better position for Andy Marsh, still knowing that Michigan was the one to beat all along. I didn't have as much confidence as Phillip Bell as I'm starting to now. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying, hey, this is a, locked on lock of the week, sort of any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying that. But I would put the ratio much better in Washington's favor for Phillip Bell than I would for Andy Marsh as we stand on Tuesday.
So I certainly agree with you where, with Andrew Marsh, it definitely feels like Michigan, all the crystal balls are pointing that way, that sort of thing where, if that's something where, he announces he commits to Michigan, and it's one of those ones where they're still pushing until signing day, as we know every school is with every single prospect that they still want that might be elsewhere. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if he ends up flipping, but that's a different discussion for a different day. I was having a conversation with Insider Ethan over on our Locked On Huskies Insider program. Links down in the description below. You should go check that out because we drop recruiting stuff like this over there all the time. And he asked me, if you had a gut feeling right now on Phillip Bell, where is it? I said USC. I still feel that way. But you're at the same point, you're right. Where, a month ago it was, oh yeah, Phillip Bell's still uncommitted. Yeah, it's USC or Ohio State. But credit to Kevin Cummings, man. It's still building, and it still feels like, his mind may be made up. And there's I'll just say non-zero, because I don't want to say 10, 15, whatever. There's a non-zero chance that it's Washington. Again, let me say that so it can't get clipped. I still think it might be USC at this point in time. But if it ends up being Washington, I wouldn't be shocked, and you would have to give a major hat tip to Kevin Cummings.
Absolutely. And I think also in some respect, it might be a, indicator of what could be coming 3 or 4 months from now with his teammate.
Sure.
Dijon Lee. And I'm not saying that's again the case, but again, this is when it gets into, there's kind of 3 seasons of recruiting. There's the true off season, which is like June, July, May, June, July. There's the second season. And then there's that closing period when you actually get through the bulk of halfway through the season. And we're talking, that October to December stretch where if Washington is, 4-3, or if Washington is 6-2, that's a lot different. I know it doesn't sound like much, but if I'm a national recruit and I have the option to go to one of Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, we know the list. Washington's among the schools, but Washington is still working back up into that ascension of being a perennial New Year's Six bowl team. And it takes this type of talent to get there. Do you then, if you're, Dijon or Phil, and if Phillip Bell, let's say, commits to Washington before the season, Washington ends up going good, and then you're looking at John Richardson and saying, hey, maybe we have something here too. And I'm not saying that would be the case. Sure. Again, to your point, I don't want to get clipped and say, hey, he said he was going to flip. It's like, no. But one could lead to another. And everything we have seen it now. We have seen, at least in a mock game situation, as we talked about earlier. Recruits still necessarily haven't seen it. Even the guys that came in for the spring game truly haven't seen what this Washington offense will look like under Jedd Fisch and Jimmy Doherty. They don't know what it's going to look like with Steve Belichick and Robert Bala and company on defense. Once we get through the month of September, I would not be surprised if there's a number of guys in this 25 class that circle back to Washington because of the on-field success and product that they're saying. Because it's one thing to hear it as a recruit and, hey, it's Steve Belichick's son. Oh, wow, Bill Belichick's at practice. Oh, that's awesome. That's great. what does that actually mean when I get on campus 12 months from now or 6 months from now after I graduate high school, when maybe Bill's back in the NFL? I think that's a matter of, okay, there's still some things to play out logistically, but all this comes from these dominoes. And if you look back to what we talked about in February, March, and April about how Washington build up this 25 recruiting class, where you get the relationships built and you steadily build. Jedd's in the top 20 position right now. He's done it. He's done exactly what we thought he would do. So there's no reason to think he couldn't close on some of these guys once they start having on-field success.
You just made my life a lot easier as we start to wrap up here, because you just made a bunch of really, really good points about why Ladarian Clardy pushing back his commitment date is a really good sign for Washington. Because one of those reasons is, now that we've seen what safeties can do in this defense, once that's all on film and once that's out there in games, I'm sure there are going to be some other high profile defenders looking at, this Washington defense saying, I want to play in that. And Lars, with that being said, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. And thank you for making Locked On Huskies your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast, from NIL deals, never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our good friend Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And with that being said, we also want you to make sure you go check out the Locked On Huskies Insider Program. The link is also down in the description below. We're going to be doing a Q&A this Friday at some point after practice that we're going to put out. That's going to be unlisted. You're only going to have access to that if you are a member of the Locked On Huskies Insider Program. You get a free 2-week trial. After that, it's $4.99 a month. We're also posting so many fun things over there. You get the opportunity to chat with us one-on-one. Ask us whatever questions you might want. We're putting our thoughts out on practice. We're doing exclusive practice reports over there that you're not going to find anywhere else. And you also get access to our Google Drive, where we're going to try to do so much more with that during the season. Right now, we're just loading it up with interviews from all the games, practices. We've got all the spring interviews in there. I think there's over 3 hours of audio in there at this point that you can go check out. If you want to learn more about a whole bunch of different players we've gotten a chance to interview, and just, hear what it's like to be in our shoes for a little while, because it can be a lot of fun. And with that being said, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you hit that like button and click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.